Hello everyone and welcome to the channel. I'm Emmanuel, I'm an Airbus A330 pilot, and welcome to my very first impressions of the Aerosoft and ToLiss A340-600Pro in Microsoft Flight Simulator. Now, as the title already says, this is my first impressions over here, and this is not going to be a full system review, but we're definitely going to have a detailed look into the systems in future videos. For now, this is the first impression. Now, before we get started, just a quick word over here, since a couple of people have been asking me why I've been so late with my video on the Aerosoft and ToLiss A340, and that was purely due to the fact that I had a 7-day trip flying in the real world, and I was sent the review copy exactly 8 hours before we went off block for that trip. So yeah, basically worst possible timing. It happens, but here we are in the aircraft now. Also, if my voice does sound a little bit strange, yep, that's because I caught myself a little bit of a cold over here, but no worries about that. And now let's get right into the aircraft. So here we are in the cockpit of the Aerosoft and ToLiss Airbus A340. Let's also go ahead and turn those sounds on over here and just bring in that bit of the immersion. Now, as mentioned, this is first impression over here, and on my very first impression I gotta say the cockpit actually looks quite nice during the daylight. Now, we will be talking about night lighting in a few moments, but for now just a look around the cockpit in daylight over here. Overall, a lovely crafted flight deck with quite attention to detail, however with a couple of things where I gotta ask myself, like, what have Aerosoft done there? The visual model has completely been crafted by Aerosoft. ToLiss is developing the systems, flight dynamics and the engine model over here, so this one comes down to Aerosoft. As mentioned, this is looking quite nice, but there are a couple of blatant errors in this. First of all, the visual point of view. Like, we're sitting here as if we had our seat all the way back, with the back of the seat all the way reclined. That's kind of the view that you have in cruise when you're doing a controlled rest, but it's not the kind of view that you should have when controlling the aircraft. That'd be more like this. So, quite similar to what you know from the Phoenix Airbuses or from the default Airbuses. Quite a bit further forward so that you can properly look outside on the sides over here, so that you can view the top of the glare shield slightly. Now, to be completely fair, it should be more like this, to be honest, but then we can't read the displays anymore, so there's probably something wrong with the geometry of the aircraft there. Just something that doesn't fit down here. Now, just going back to the default point of view over here, you got the window strut on the side that's blocking your view. Out on the left shouldn't be there, and well, you also have, you know, you're just sitting too far in the back here, so kind of gotta modify that point of view to become this, then it's looking a lot better. Now, as mentioned earlier, a couple more visual thingies. Number one is the side stick down there. Like, what have Aerosoft done? That is not a correct looking side stick. It's kind of funny. If we go back some 10 years, the Aerosoft side stick model back then was good enough that FS Labs actually stole it for their Airbus, and now we're sitting here and Aerosoft is delivering this. Like, yeah, okay. The switches on the side over here could also use a little more detail, and one thing that I really notice is the evacuation switch over here. That's just a completely wrong switch model. They just copied it from the battery or from the trim tank selector, but that should be a whole different model of a switch over there. So those are the couple of points that I came across when looking through the flight deck at daylight. Now let's go ahead and switch over to night lighting and just look at what Aerosoft have done over here, because while the model does look quite good in daylight, it absolutely sucks at night. So look at this. That's not what an Airbus cockpit looks like. Any of you who've flown the Phoenix, who've flown the FS Labs, know that you should have vertical lights coming down over here, over here, over here, and over here. In the Aerosoft model, it's kind of a Boeing 737 lighting where the entire main panel is lit up, which really makes me wonder. Aerosoft has years of experience modeling Airbus cockpits. In fact, 10 years ago I worked with Aerosoft on their A330 and we had the lights right. So what have they done? What have they thought modeling this main panel lighting? That's just completely beyond me. Likewise, down here, the main panel floodlight illuminates a little bit too far of an area. It should be limited to something going up here to the engine masters and mostly that area down there, but definitely not as large of an area as it does over here. We can kind of see the same thing on the floodlights there. If we do turn them down, again, it illuminates far too much of an area. That is not what Airbus night lights look like at all. The same unfortunately also applies to the dome lights. If we do turn the controller on, this is the dome light dim position, which is far, far brighter than the real world bright position. We turn that up to bright, let's try and reach that switch over there, then yeah, that's not what an Airbus cockpit looks like at night. It is not at all. So unfortunately, for a long-haul airliner where every second flight is a night flight, this is beyond me, completely beyond me, how Aerosoft could have made such a blatant error with completely wrong lighting. Like, didn't they have any pilots on board of their team who would have told them that this is wrong? I kind of can't believe that. I have to believe that the pilots told them and they were like, yeah, we don't care, we're gonna release it anyway. It's the only explanation, but I can't comprehend this, honestly. Now, from here on, let's go ahead and talk about a couple of the positive items of the aircraft, and that is the passenger cabin. So, if we have a look at the back of the flight deck, those things over here are looking pretty good, pretty realistic. There's a lot of the stuff that's supposed to be there is here and is looking correct. The jump seat is kind of in a little bit of a forward position. It would be nice if we could actually control it and put it back into the standard cruise position. Like this is more like the takeoff position where the cruise relief pilot would be sitting here monitoring everything going on. And we could fold it a little bit further forward to something like this, but it seems to take up a little bit much space over there. But going over into the passenger cabin here, okay, for some weird reason, what have they? Hello? Okay, that's a weird model of the flight deck door, but no further comment on that one. Going into the passenger cabin then, we actually have a very decent model of a passenger cabin, including the first class that you would find on the Lufthansa A340-600s, modeled very nicely and to a very good standard. I really do like this. There is only one single piece of complaint that I gotta do, and I'm German, so I have to complain about something, otherwise it's not authentic. The seatbelt and no smoking signs are missing, and what is this? I don't want to know. But if we take our view away from the overhead part over there, it's a lovely cabin model that I can really only just appreciate. First class is looking fantastic. Going over into business class then, again, beautiful model. If we just take a seat over here, it's fantastic. I really don't have much to add over there. Could improve some textures a little bit, but that's all small stuff. I'm sure that Hughes by Horizon and the likes are going to create fantastic updates for that. The walls and the wing views are absolutely fantastic. Really can't overemphasize how much I do like those. And even going further back into premium economy and eventually economy, they've just done a fantastic job. I do believe that this cabin is very much inspired by the real-world Lufthansa cabin, so it's a cabin that I'm fairly familiar with, and yeah, they've just done a fantastic job on that. Also going over into premium economy over here, we can just take a seat somewhere close to the wing. Again, look at this. Fantastic. Also, the look out at the wing over here, very, very nicely done. But we will be talking about the wing and the outside view later. Let's just move all the way back into economy class. I think this is actually supposed to be economy already. But let's just move all the way back so that we've seen it all. So this is the back of the plane. Overall, very nice cabin model, and I'm getting very good frame rates in here as well. So I'm really happy with that. The only thing that bugs me is when you get into the back of the plane here, and I think this is supposed to be a model of the curtain, but number one, why does the curtain melt into the wall on the side there? And number two, why can't you open it? And then when you go into the aft galley, that mirror is waiting for us here. Overall, a little disappointing textures over here. They've done a better job in the front galleys. On the other hand side, how many people are actually going to go into the aft galley? Probably not too many. So I guess in order to save a little performance, this is fine. But it definitely is something that does strike me when taking a tour of the passenger cabin. Now, since they've modeled this aircraft in accordance with the Lufthansa real-world cabin, they also have these stairs on the way down into the lower deck, where you do find the toilets for economy. The only problem here is that there seems to be an invisible wall that actually prevents me from going there. But we can see the part exists. I'm not 100% sure about that wall. Maybe something for them to fix in an update, but you get the idea. So that's one of those special features that you find in the Airbus A340-600 that I am not aware exists in literally any other aircraft at all. Or is any one of you aware of something? Overall, beautifully crafted cabin. Not as high of a level of detail as, for example, the Phoenix or the Indie-Builds cabins, but it has superb performance, and on a large airplane like this, that's the most important thing over here. And the closer you get to the flight deck, the higher the quality of the model actually becomes, so I'm pretty happy with that. A couple of things though, like that Lufthansa business class logo here that could definitely use some small improvement, but as mentioned, I'm German, so if I'm not complaining, then I'm probably not honest. Alright, moving our way back into the flight deck, we could start talking about a little bit of the systems and the sounds over here, but I feel that since we are already moving about and exploring the model, let's also go ahead and do the same for the outside model. And yeah, it's a little loud here, so I am just going to kill those sounds, making this a little bit nicer. Now, going out and about, we can have a look at the visual model, and I'm completely honest with you, I'm not exactly blown away by it, but it has a couple of very nice details. So it's kind of the type of model where 5 years ago I would have said, like, fantastic. Nowadays it's more like, yeah, a little below average, but still okay and acceptable. You probably get what I mean when we just walk around and look at it. So there are some areas of the model that are really high quality, like for example the landing gear over here. Very nicely modeled, lots of details, and the same also applies to things like the tires down there. Even the front over here with the different lights, with the runway turn-off lights, the taxi and takeoff lights, and that kind of stuff. Inside the wheel, well, it's also looking quite good, even though there could be a couple more details in there. But overall, very nice model of the landing gear and the landing gear doors there. However, when going a little bit further away, there are some things that strike me. For example, in the front over here, I just can't help myself, but the model doesn't feel 100% correct. Like when I'm doing the walk around on the A330, which is supposed to have the same nose as the A340-600, then this entire thing isn't so stretched. What's also rather noticeable when you go into the outside view and just go a little away from the airplane is that there is a notable bump in between the main fuselage textures and the nose cone textures. Let's just take that sun over here and move it a little, so that I can show you. Like over here, have a look at the main texture, and then have a look at the nose cone, which seems to have completely different reflectivity, which isn't the case in the real-world airplane at all. It may be made of a different material. I'm not 100% sure what they used there to allow the beams of the weather radar to pass a little nicer, but when you look at it from the outside, it looks exactly the same in terms of reflectivity and everything else as the rest of the fuselage does in the real world. Unfortunately not in the simulated version. We can even see this when we're getting a little closer right now. The same also applies to all the plating along the fuselage here. Like, this just seems to be too strong. You wouldn't notice the different attachments of the panels that much in the real world. And one other thing that does strike me over here is the level of details that have been put here. For example, on the top over here we can see all the bolts put in place, but then at the bottom it's just black texturing down here, which is kind of weird. Like, why have two different sets of quality of the airplane? The same applies, for example, in the back over here, when we have a look at the texturing over here on the belly, like where we got really good amount of details and where you can see everything clearly. And then you're moving just a little bit further forward and all of a sudden you no longer do. Like, what's going on there? Likewise, we gotta ask, what's going on that metal here anyway? Like, you got these parts where it seems like all the paint is already coming off, and I mean, honestly, that's not what an in-service airplane would look like. Maybe a museum piece. And I do agree that many A340s are becoming museum pieces nowadays, but we're supposed to have an in-service airplane here. Especially if you look at the details on the wings down here. Where are all those scratch marks coming from? I've never seen those, and I have seen some pretty old Airbuses. So that's just really strange. Also, these parts over here really can't explain what these are. Certainly have never seen something like that on an actual airplane. The same also applies to things like the winglets, where I'm thinking like someone might just have wanted to add some last minute details, but look at this. This is absolutely not what a wing like that should look like. Like, how is that even supposed to physically happen on the wings here? Especially when you got an airplane that's supposed to be, you know, a rather new one. Wingtip here as well. You know, I have chosen the Hotel India livery here because that one's only been painted a couple of years ago. And talking about inaccuracies here, why is the wing grey? This is a Lufthansa model. It's supposed to be white. So you get why I'm saying, like, yeah, it is the generally good looking model. There are some very fine details in there. Like if we look at the engines over here, that's fantastic. Fantastic markings, fantastic details. Someone's really put an awesome amount of work into those engines. Then I'm looking at the wing, and I'm like, is that the same artist? Is that even the same add-on that we're looking at? Well, I can't help myself. I really can't help myself over here. So that much about the model. Now, let's go right back into the cockpit over here and just have a small talk about what we see in here. So far, pretty much all the points of critique I've voiced were things that Aerosoft have developed. But there are a couple of things on the ToLiss side of things as well. So when I'm looking at the displays over here, especially the primary flight display, but the others as well, something just seems odd, and at first I couldn't quite put it into words, and I really thought about how to say this. But looking at the PFD, when you compare that with a real-world Airbus PFD, some things are just wrong. Like the size of the numbers down here, the position of the QNH should be quite a bit further up. Then the fonts seem okay. I know that there is a saying going on in the internet that ToLiss would be using Arial fonts, but when comparing the ToLiss aircraft with pictures from the real-world aircraft, it seems that most of the fonts are okay. Like, the 0 is a little bit too wide, small kind of stuff, but something strikes me with those displays. I can't quite put it into words, but something is off. Maybe the general proportions? I don't know. It's just something. Now, as mentioned earlier, I haven't gone into the systems in detail yet because this is literally my first impression of the aircraft. So I will be going into a lot more details with the systems, and I'm sure that that is where the airplane is going to shine. However, as an honest part of my first impressions over here, I was rather excited to see what they have implemented as data link systems, especially since the product page advertises 3 fully functional MCDUs. Like, I'm just going to pull that one up on the screen over here. So this This is the product page. Just go down a little bit. It says down here, 3 completely functional, fully independent MCDUs. And I'm honest, I was quite excited about that feature. The only problem is that it's not there. So what do we actually have in those MCDUs? We got the FMS, and the FMS is, according to what I could see by now, done to a pretty good standard with 3 bugs that I could see so far on my first 2 attempts. The first one was that saving the route in order to review the flight plan was impossible. So you could go down there, it's data, next page, pilot's route, hit store active flight plan, only works if there's something programmed, so can't do that right now. And simply nothing would happen. Now that is the function that we use in every single flight. The second thing is up here on the progress page, the optimum flight level. Now, in the real world, the optimum flight level is dependent on several things. It's dependent on the length of the flight. So if you do a short flight, like for example Frankfurt to Munich, which was a test flight that I've done, it should show you something about flight level 230, 240, something about that altitude. Instead it went for something like level 400, which makes no sense. You can't reach that flight level on that short flight. And the real-world Airbus does take that into account. The ToLiss one doesn't. But the next thing that struck me even more is that the real-world Airbus Optimum also takes the winds into account. Now, here's something I want you to try. Program a long-haul flight and just change your cruise winds manually. Take the altitude that would be shown as optimum and add a 100 knot headwind across the entire flight. Now you take an altitude that's 2,000 feet lower and you manually insert a wind with 100 knots tailwind. In the real world, the optimum does react to the wind. It checks the winds and then gives you the actual optimum level. For the Boeing pilots among you, optimum in Airbus world works like recommended in 777 world, respectively 787 and 747 world. The way that ToLiss have modeled it, it's completely independent of the winds. The optimum doesn't change. And that means that it's a simple readout from a table. Like, at this gross weight, this is my aerodynamic optimum. But it's a lot more complex than that in the real world, taking things like the winds or the trip length into account, which apparently ToLiss have not done. Now lastly, the product page also advertises that step climbs are limited or are implemented in the aircraft. You can probably already see where I'm going at when I'm saying... you can probably already get where I'm going with that, but here it is on the product page, including step climbs. Now, Airbus World, you go to the step page on your flight plan page. You enter an altitude without any waypoint attached to it, and it should calculate an optimum step climb. When you do that in the ToLiss, you just get an error that it can't handle that. So that means that step climbs, which are once again based on optimum altitudes, things like wind, etc., so complex calculations are not implemented in this product. And that's kind of my first impression of the systems. We are yet to go into things like the electricals, hydraulics, etc., which I am absolutely sure ToLiss has done an awesome job with. But then again, I installed the aircraft, I went for 2 flights, and that's the kind of stuff that struck me. So what I can say over here is that, unfortunately, in some of the obvious things, like SOP things that you do on every single flight, ToLiss does not seem to have the system depth that we would expect from ToLiss based on their reputation in the X-Plane world. Also, notice how I talked about the 3 fully implemented MCDUs before, which is what they do advertise on their product page. Like, here it is, first line in the aircraft systems FMGS suite. Now, to be completely fair, they are talking about FMGS over there, but down here they write 3 fully functional, fully independent MCDUs. Now, if you take it absolutely literal, an MCDU is just the hardware unit. Yeah, you can touch every single button of it, so technically speaking, the MCDU is fully implemented. But obviously, what every simmer is led to believe is that the MCDU menus are all there, and unfortunately, they're pretty much all missing. So we do have the FMS. We do have very limited set in the ATSU. Let's just open that down here. And I mean, just look at this. There's almost nothing there. Almost nothing. You can do flight init, which is going to uplink the flight plan in an unrealistic manner, unfortunately. Real world doesn't fill out all that stuff. It only puts some very limited amount of information in. So sec flight plan insert. Let's just do that real quick. It's doing this because the engines are running. And activate. Okay. So this is pretty much what you get in an uplink in the real world. When you're sitting at the gate with the engines off in the ToLiss and you do the flight init, fills everything out for you. Definitely not supposed to do that. Now, from here, we do have the ATIS request, we do have the weather request, which is unfortunately bugged, because in the real world, if I would enter, for example, FRA for Frankfurt, request that, then it would convert that into the correct ICAO code and give me that weather. In the simulator, it doesn't happen, it's just going to give you an error. So this page is unfortunately not really completely implemented there. It's also missing the direct ATIS prompt. And then going to the second page, you do have the departure clearance and the de-icing and anti-icing reports, which is quite good. But then again, over here, it's missing a lot of info that the real page has. So that's a very, very basic data link implementation. And apart from that, there should be several more menus. For example, on the primary or the left and the right MCDUs, there should be backup nav function over here. That is vital for being allowed to cross the Atlantic. It's completely missing. Then, where is the SATCOM? Where is the CMS? And CMS is a function that we use on pretty much almost every flight to look up the water levels in the tanks without having to walk back to the galley. You know, when you advertise 3 fully implemented MCDUs, I would expect that kind of stuff to be there, but it's missing down here. Another thing we need to talk about is the taxi cameras. So, we already knew from the adverts that they were limited, but it just strikes me how limited they are. So, we're sitting here at Aerosoft Frankfurt Airport, which, seeing that Lufthansa is the main operator of A340-600s nowadays, most people are probably going to use as their home base. Now, the product page does put a little disclaimer on there. If we look into the product page up here, we will see that the taxi camera is based on the MSFS map API. Now, most users are not going to know what that is. So, what it actually is kind of like a very low resolution overlay that, you know, you would see, for example, on the default 787 on the NDS airport map. But that is definitely not suited as a taxi camera because, as you can see, it includes no details at all. Like, if you have a look at where we're standing right now, you got the taxiway signs and markings, you got the center line, you got the runway center line. All that stuff that would actually be important is completely missing on here. So what am I supposed to use this for? I really can't tell. Because, like this, I don't know how to use it to taxi accurately at all. Well, and that is my personal first impression. And we haven't even talked about the EFB. Could someone finally tell developers the difference between a checklist and a flow? Because what they've done here is not a checklist. You can modify it if you know how to add it to a little XML, if you don't ask ChatGPT to do it. You can modify that. There's also files for the real checklist available on flightsim.to already. But, come on. Now, to be completely fair, there are some nice points in the EFB as well, especially the takeoff and landing performance, which is almost one-to-one the same as the real-world Airbus unit. That's fantastic. That's really nice. There's also a lot of lovely things down here in the settings, in the scenarios that you can load up. You can do a lot of lovely things down here. We're gonna get into that when we do our systems and our complete flights. But for now, I'm honest with you, a little disappointed. I would have expected more. Especially since both Aerosoft and ToLiss are experienced developers. Like, is this really all they have for the flight plan? No chapters, no way to bring something up? Why do they only have a Navigraph implementation? Where is the Lido implementation? That type of stuff. I can't even pin a chart. Basic stuff. Very basic stuff. Weight and balance. Why do I get the same zero fuel weight that's planned on SimBrief only by selecting passengers? Where's the cargo? Let's just go ahead and have a look at that. So here's the SimBrief flight that I have planned. And looking over here, we're on the Lufthansa 400 real-world flight on the A340-600. And looking down here, we've got an estimated zero fuel weight of 239.2. Now, let's go to the added flight screen, and I'm going to show you how we got to that zero fuel weight. Come on, SimBrief, you can do it. So, down here, we selected 297 passengers, 24 tons of cargo. Now, let's go ahead and select that same amount of passengers in the ToLiss and see what we are going to get. So, 297. That's kind of like this, 297. And then we had 24 tons of cargo. The problem you're going to find is that if we look at this, zero fuel weight 215.2, and now we just remove that cargo from SimBrief in a few moments over here. So let's take that cargo, take it away, and just generate that flight. We now get 215.2. But if we have a look down here, we get those same 215.2, but there is literally zero cargo. In other words, there is no allocation for baggage weight, or if you want to see it the other way around, if you have a look at the estimated weights over there, you can see one passenger is calculated as 100 kilos. Now that's far away from what real-world airlines use per passenger. In other words, if you're loading the aircraft based on the number of passengers only, then you end up with a completely incorrect zero fuel weight. So 215.2, but 100 kilos per passengers. In the real world, it's something like 77 kilos per passengers, plus the weight of their baggage. But why is the weight of the baggage included in the weight of the passenger? Because that's the only thing that we can assume over here. In the real world, most passengers do not carry 23 kilograms of bags. But ToLiss forces this on us. Or is this Aerosoft? I'm not 100% sure. It kind of looks like the ToLiss version in X-Point, so I'm inclined to say that this is ToLiss. But you get where I'm going at with this. Now, yes, there are a lot of nice things down here as well, like the joystick settings, the replay function. That's fantastic stuff. But this is just my first impressions, and you probably get why I'm a little disappointed with this aircraft. Like, it's not what I would have expected it to be, based on the adverts on the product page, and based on ToLiss's reputation in X-Plane. Now, I am going to do a lot of flights with this aircraft, so I do hope that my first impression is maybe a wrong one. It may have been inspired by the fact that the first time I loaded the aircraft, I did choose a nighttime scenario, and, well, I was faced by, you know, this over here, and I was like, what the hell? So I may have gotten a little wrong impression of the aircraft at first over here, but this is kind of what came upon me. Like, there are some very good aspects in this airplane, and I'm sure that it has fantastic systems, which we are going to explore in the next couple of videos, but to be completely honest, I feel underwhelmed, especially looking at the price of the product. Like, they release it with a discount, but it still costs 70 bucks. That still makes it the second most expensive add-on currently on the market. And that price is going to go up to over 80 euros. That's pretty expensive. So let's hope that they will be able to polish all the parts that are letting us down right now, especially the night lighting. I mean, come on. You can't release this. Really, guys. But they did. So let's hope that that stuff is eventually going to be improved. Well, guys, And that's my personal first impression here of the ToLiss and Aerosoft A340-600 Pro in Microsoft Flight Simulator. Now, I know that this is a little negative, a little disappointing. By the way, does anyone notice that the logo lights are off? Like, why is that? Have I forgotten to turn them on? No, switch is on. Okay, bug. So yeah, that is my first impression of the Aerosoft and ToLiss A340-600. I do hope that you enjoyed this video. I hope that you are going to come back for future videos, because we are definitely going to take this airplane through its paces in both normal flight conditions and in the different failure scenarios. I'm really looking forward to do that, despite the overall context of this video being a little negative. But now it's up to you. Share your experience in the comments underneath the video. Let me know how you liked it or how you don't like it. And let me know if you think that the price is worth what you're getting with this airplane. Thank you very much for watching. As always, like, comment, and subscribe. And if you really love what I'm doing on this channel, no, let's not go into that after a rather negative video. No, thanks guys. I'm looking forward to see you all on the next one, where we are going to take this airplane through its paces.